All right, we're going to get Joe on in a minute. We're just going to give you a bit of a background about Joe, and then we'll get Joe in.
Yeah, Joe Puente has been a practicing spiritualist since an early age. His intense desire to solve some basic life's riddles prompted him to study various belief systems as well as spiritual practices. These studies and personal practices over time have resulted in first-hand accounts of a very mysterious world. His accounts are written in a book entitled Things Magical Once Hidden Revealed, My Personal Awakening of Magic, Mysticism and Miracles.
Fantastic. Good evening, Joe. How are you doing?
Good evening, you guys. How are you guys doing, Alan?
Not too bad. Thanks for coming on to Open Your Mind Radio. Now, Steve just read out a little bit of your bio. I know it's a bit longer than that. So before we get into anything, just tell us about yourself and just expand a little bit more on your biography there.
Excellent. Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, well, this basically surrounds my life experiences on the mystical path. I'm very familiar with the West understanding of things of the mystical, magic, miracles and all that stuff. There's a lot of skepticism. And I'm hoping that, and what I bring to the table not only brings like some of the evidence, scientific evidence, but also the personal experiences. And for those who are walking some given path and who are studying their own, say, innate potential, my book kind of works as a guide to show what happens, what to expect, how to, refine certain techniques, if you will, to be able to access these other levels of consciousness, which are very real. And I've been around many psychics, so like they have definitely validated my experiences. Not that I needed it, but for more of a public audience, because a lot of this stuff could be very new and hard to believe for some people. So, yes. Okay, so basically that's what I cover. And what ultimately got me involved in this stuff was at a very young age, I always felt just like, the world really didn't make too much sense, being as intelligent of a design it is, and yet we're still walking around, being confused about certain things, not knowing why we're here. So it was these basic prompts that, seeing myself as some dynamic animated object, being able to think creatively and all this stuff in the world, the universe, as you look up to the sky, you're like, there's something going on besides what we're told, And at a young age, probably like about maybe 13, 14 years old is when I really started looking into like various belief systems. And ultimately, I was guided to like New Age information through my older brother. And that's where I found that there was some amazing stuff going on, and I had to get my first-hand experiences with it. So I was definitely going to spiritual classes, doing the meditations, buying books here and there. And during that period, I used to refer to that period as like the boot camp, meditation days, because I was so intense. Like I was so sure that I'd experienced something that, nothing was going to stand in the way. And finally, the egg started cracking, so to speak.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, and little by little, the more I started doing it, the more experience I started having. And then this ultimately came in relation towards, being that it was New Age information that I was reading at that early age, I was seeing how it was connected towards this whole New Age concept, and what the New Age was about, higher consciousness. At first, I was very skeptical about it, but the more I started reading about it, the more I started having experiences, the more it started revealing that there was actually something behind it after all. Yes, and so hopefully
do you think the New Age has been hijacked, and there's a difference between the spiritual and the New Age?
Absolutely. That's a very good point in regards to this, because it is a pretty important question, because we're at a crossroads, I believe, as a planet, because, it's just, there's so much chaos, for one, and at the same time, there's so much potential that we have to get back on track to where we have to organically grow in our own evolution, And it's important that we inquire upon the spiritual metaphysical aspects of life, because then it'll get you back on track as to where we're ultimately supposed to go, as to where all the prophecies refer to. And yes, I do believe it's been hijacked in regards to information, I believe a lot of hype was surrounding this whole New Age concept as, such as the thing, the end of the world, right? I mean, you have movies like 2012, referring to like, oh, this world's going to end. No. Even the minds say like, no, it's just like a transition of an age,
Okay.
And if you want to go into the ages, it's basically every age has a different personality type for humanity, And as we progress, we're getting more attuned to the more subtler vibrations of we discover energy, how to manipulate it, and the next phases should be understanding the aspects of consciousness.
So,
yes.
So where are we now? Because obviously we spoke to our last guest, and we always say as well that we are all energy. I mean,
yes.
Science tells us that if you get an electron microscope and drill down and look at your hand, you will see atoms vibrating. If you get the same electron microscope and drill down and look at the table or the chair or the computer, you see atoms vibrating. So we're all energy, we're all resonating. Now, the consciousness of the planet seems to be changing. What's your take on that? What do you think is happening? What's going on at the moment?
Yeah, absolutely. There's no doubt that there is people are beginning to wake up, I think we have to give a lot of thanks to things like the internet. Information is so easily and quickly accessible. Things that used to be highly hidden, is now quite available it's like you have your own library and, on your lap, pretty much if you have a laptop, right? I think it's really, creating the change of mind that people are beginning to open up more towards these, at times hard to believe possibilities. I mean, even with science, now they're beginning to say like, hey, well, maybe these mystic people were right in multiple dimensions, such as Michio Kaku. He's a
scientist, yeah.
Yes, and he even comes to now, because he introduces the concept of I believe it's, string theory, or where we live in a world of infinite universes.
Yeah.
So it's quite possible that, what they were talking about, these ghosts, these mystic powers, that could be an actual dimension that people are just accessing, So I think before, science was very much against this subject. But, on the mainstream surface, there are those individual scientists that have looked into, like, the psychic abilities, even governments have studied, paranormal stuff. So there is information out there, there is evidence, and I think it's beginning to flood the internet, I think, a lot more apparently nowadays, when, because more people are catching interest, so they're sharing their information, and we're beginning to learn some fascinating stuff,
And how do you define what is disinformation as opposed to real information? You yourself, when you come across it, if you're doing your research, because we have to be careful with the spiritual and New Age. And we know the New Age has been hijacked, and we've been told by previous guests that, if you put the truth in a barrel full of lies, it's very hard to find it. And there's so much New Agey ascension process going to happen, and all this kind of stuff. How do you define that? How do you separate the wheat from the chaff and decide what's right and what's disinformation?
That's a very good question, because there are a lot of fanciful ideas as to what's supposed to happen. What is it? The rapture, right, from the Bible, for instance.
That's right, yeah.
Or things like, we're gonna be abducted by aliens and they're gonna take us to a comet like that. That cult group that ended up committing suicide, all that. You're right. There are some strange ideas out there. When it comes to the subject, so you basically have to deal with it as grounded as possible. I'm not saying to go live in the mountains, because the world's going to end. Nothing of that nature. It's very practical. Keep your day jobs, because there's extremists in everything. So that's not the route one should take. We got to implement the word of wisdom again, right? We got to make sure that there's sound. It's sound, and that it's not something that pretty much could be detrimental towards our own understanding, our own psyche, and pretty much the process is self-awakening, Everything should be brought down to a simple formula, and it's the same thing with this whole New Age concept. If it's designed to happen, if it's predestined to happen, it's going to happen, whether we, whatever we do with it. It's just being aware of the process seems to be where we should be at the time right now. Considering that it is the beginning of a new age. I mean, we're looking at the baby form, not the adult form. You consider what a baby can do to a planet, and, an adult can. There's a vast world of a difference, But we're seeing those buds grow, and the way we should, as a conscious planet, that has to cognize things and integrate it into their understanding, think reasonably logically towards the subject, is to basically, the first thing is to simply be aware things are changing. You know, one thing that remains constant is change. And it's like, okay, this information is coming to us. What does it mean to us? You know, where should we go with it? It's ultimately showing you who you truly are, and your connectedness towards your creator. You know.
Can I ask you about what you've just said there? I mean, would you define that self-awakening and self-awareness are two different things, and two things that we have to be aware of, and are not the same thing?
They can be separated. At the same time, though, when you bring them together, which is an interesting point, because yeah, you could be aware, you could be a conscious living individual, you know, being aware of your environment, and at the same time not do anything, kind of like sitting in the bleachers at a game, you know? Are you going to be a part of the game, or are you going to be, you know, watching it, kind of, so to speak? I believe that there should be a healthy balance of both in regards to, yes, if these things are true, you know, these mystical realities, obviously there's laws that should be abided by so we don't stray too far for where we should be taking our individual selves, our identity, our soul, you know, our livelihood, right? And ultimately, I think it's important to be aware before you actually act upon anything. So I think the awareness should help, you know, stimulate and birth that self-awakening, you know? Because you're right, you just don't want to digest any information that's given to you, right? You want to make sure that it's something that's going to, you know, nurture an awakening process.
The reason why I say the difference between the awakening process and the self-awareness process being two different things is the awakening process has got to do with being aware of what's going on in the world globally regarding, you know, everything. I mean, literally everything that's going on. But, and there's a lot of people who are self-awake as to what's going on. But the self-awareness is knowing who you are as a spiritual being, experiencing life in physical form, and your energy and your vibration, and how energy can affect you. And that's the next step after the self-awakening, because you have the people who are asleep, and the sheeple, as we might call them, who don't know what's going on. And then you have the self-awakening, which is when they realize what's going on. And then you have the self-awareness, is to realize who they are in the scheme of things, and the whole spiritual side. So they're the kind of processes I personally think, in my own opinion, we have to go through.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I definitely think there's like a microcosmic, macrocosmic, you know, relation with the way things unfold, especially with something of this regard. Yeah, it's a very interesting process as to how it integrates into one's life and in the world in general. The way I look at it, it's like you got to look at it like you have polluted water, you know, very dark, very murky, and that would be basically our evolution understanding as to who we are, who we're becoming, right? You know, we've made mistakes. There's wars. There's, you know, dangers. There's just a bunch of negative aspects to living, and then there's a lot of the you know, the heroes, so to speak, of the world. And I think in bringing this type of information, it dissipates the murkiness, you know, the dense murkiness of our evolving understanding of who we are, you know? And I think that's where I bring like an interesting scope onto this topic, because I have accessed, you know, like I've successfully opened up my third eye. I've had psychic experiences myself. I've had miracles happen. People have been around, you know. I've had a lot of these things happen on that metaphysical world that has confirmed not only that, you know, that reality is real and accessible and anybody can do it, but that there is a connection with this New Age concept. And I know how that sounds, you know, with what I say at that, but I've had experiences that does connect with the concept of an age shift, you know, a New Age.
Maybe we need to change the name. Now, you have a book out on Amazon, and it's called Things Magical Once Hidden Revealed, My Personal Awakening of Magic Mysticism and Miracles During a Time in Transition. Now, obviously, you felt inspired to write the book based on your experiences, and you said just there that you've opened your third eye. How did you manage to do that, and what would you advise people to do if they're on a spiritual journey? What do they need to do?
First off, there's discipline. It's effort. When it comes down to anything, it's like any art. It's like, the more you do it, the more it will start approaching you, It's the law of levels, absolutely the law of levels, at least in my experience. Some people may have it automatically because they were just born psychic, and I've definitely come across those people. But when it comes to someone who, like you and I, who started fresh, like no powers or anything like that, how to access that stuff. What helped me was basically I was reading books on the subject, and one book that was key in helping ground this type of experience and information, not thinking I'm all like weird, like some oddball, was like a book by Paramahansa Yogananda, Autobiography of a Yogi. Are you guys familiar with that book?
I've heard of it.
It's one of my favorite spiritual books. A lot of this mystical, magical stuff happens in there. And, there's been fake ones, you could say Sidhus or yogis from the East or India, but there's been some real ones. He's one of the real ones. A student from America wrote a book on their experiences when he came over here to teach about all the magic stuff that he was doing. His brother wrote about a book when he was young, all the crazy miracles that he was doing and all that stuff, and, of course, his own self-autobiography of a yogi. But yes, basically, that helps stimulate those energies. It's kind of like channels of water. If you create the grooves, the waters will flow more naturally towards the direction where you want them to go, right?
Okay.
But if you don't have the information, it's like water's kind of going all over the place. It doesn't know what to attach to. It's basically following the grooves of what it knows, or just like basically our minds will go through what it understands. So the thing is that it helps to understand what happens in that world. So books like Autobiography of the Yogi, or maybe some books on some of these psychics, how they have these visions of, people like, falling into a river and, they find the body, or something of that nature, right?
Well, funny you should say that, because today, when I woke up, I was watching a bit of TV, a rare thing for me, but watching TV, I kind of flick around and look for things of interest, and they actually had an American version of the psychic detective. And the police were using the psychic detectives to solve murder cases which they couldn't solve themselves.
Yes.
Which I find quite interesting. Obviously, being, myself and Steve are spiritual in our own way. We've talked about this on the show before. But these people that you've said, like yogis that have abilities or powers or things they're doing, can you give us an example of the feats that they're doing using this meditation and skills they've developed?
Absolutely. I'm not familiar much with your audience, but if they are spiritually inclined, I would not doubt, they've come across Paramahansa Yogananda in their studies. Yes, absolutely. And I can also validate some of the things that he covers. I mean, some of these things are highly advanced, extreme stuff, which I can understand people at a glance. I can be like, yeah, whatever, But the more you study it, the more you start experiencing the stuff inside. You're like, oh my God, maybe they're right. Maybe that stuff is real, the more advanced stuff, right? Well, he talks about things like from, levitation, like this one yogi who has, two bodies, who's able to project his physical form into other places, like by location, his psychic abilities, his ability, it's all the magic you read in storybooks is in that book, and it's based as an actual event, And with some of the more advanced stuff that he covers is he refers to a yogi referred to as Babaji. And according to this book, he has powers that are quite incomprehensible to a practical human individual, meaning that this guy could bilocate, he can manifest things at will, and he can, even in the book, he refers to this one phase where I think Babaji states that he's going to remain in physical form until a given cycle is, proceeded. So there's a lot of this advanced, fancy stuff that's going on. One thing that has been recorded in regards to some of these mystical abilities, you might have heard of such a thing known as the rainbow body. Have you ever heard of the rainbow body in Tibet?
I've heard, once or twice I've heard about it, but I don't know much about it.
It's very interesting. It's basically a practice that's a certain sect of Buddhist, Indian Buddhists do, Himalayan Buddhists do, to achieve what's known as the rainbow body, where literally their body will shrink when they die, right? And a corpse will not shrink. It just it pretty much remains the size it's supposed to be, right? Or it was in existence. So the thing is that when this body dies, it will shrink down to, say, like 2 feet, just small sizes. It's been witnessed and recorded from my studies, from the Chinese government. They've seen these bodies completely disappear and transfigure into light, where rainbows are detected leaving the body and stuff like that. So there's a lot of fancy stuff. I mean, if you want to go into what the Chinese have studied in this regard, there's a book known as China's Super Psychics, which it talks about how the Chinese government has studied these children for like the past 80 years that have had incredible abilities, like psychic abilities, where they're able to even like reputable magazines like Omni magazine has gone to them. They've studied these kids, and they're like, okay, well, they get, like, for instance, they have a bunch of books. Omni takes home books, and they give it to the kid. They're like, oh, no, they'll be like, okay, read a sentence, and then they end up reading like an entire page. There's other powers where, like, these kids are able to actually write psychically on a blank sheet of paper without ever touching it, opening up rosebuds and, giving rosebuds to a crowd. A little Asian child will wave her hand, and then after all these rosebuds open,
are these like crystal children?
Yes.
So these are crystal children, because I did see a video, and the guy was filmed on video of this Chinese chap who could actually use the chi energy to set paper on fire.
Oh, yes.
Right? And of course, we talk about the indigo children and the crystal children.
Yes, absolutely. Another guy, there's a, you can check out some interesting things on YouTube that covers this as well, One guy actually came out on, over here we have a show called Ripley's Believe It or Not. I'm California, by the way, for the audience.
Yeah, we know the TV show, yeah.
Okay, buddy. So the thing is that they have, we have a show out here called Ripley's Believe It or Not. They show a lot of fancy things that people can do, right? And one of them, they show this one energy healer who, he simply goes to, like, I think, Joe, Master Joe or something like that. And they show with the thermal camera, he'll dampen a cloth, put some aluminum foil, I guess, to help with the heat, and you'll see him emanating his energy. And not only will you see steam rising from this cloth, but you also see the temperature increasing in the thermal camera. And he was able to get it to like 212, which is basically boiling point, correct? That's not the only video, but the evidence is out there to say, yes, there is an energy known as chi that we can access, and definitely it's been known to heal. That's what they use to heal bodies and stuff like that. And it's real. With the right study, you could definitely find out this stuff. And I've actually had experiences myself. I've had healings done. I've done healings. I know how this sounds. Ask the psychics. It's very real. And anybody could do it. That's the wonderful thing about this universe, this energy,
Okay, so there's people out there who probably want to get involved, not so much for the healing. We know there's Reiki healers out there, and people do get involved in healing, and we have more ability than we all know. And this information has been taken away from us purposely. The knowledge has been taken away because they want to keep us down. Where do you think we are at now with what's happening globally with the energy? Because people are talking about the energy coming from the center of the galaxy hitting the planet, and the Schumann frequency going up in frequency, and a lot of people developing certain abilities because of this energy. I mean, do you believe that's happening at the moment? Have you seen that yourself?
I have not seen that myself, but I'm not close to that idea, and I'm actually, there is evidence out there that does seem to suggest that, absolutely, well, science has proven that there is an energy out there that some have say that is emitted from the center of the galaxy. I remember when I first read about this was like in 1994 or 7, and I first learned about it. It was referred to as like the photon band. That's how I knew about it. That our solar system is going into this thing known as the photon band, which is basically higher charged energy particles, right? And so the thing is that I even came across a psychic, and I was like, is that real? In my young skeptical mind. And he's like, well, yeah, I'm going to have to say yeah, And so a good person to refer to the information in this regard, I believe, and I know you guys have interviewed him, and I'm a fan of his work, David Wilcock. You guys have interviewed him, correct?
Yeah, David has been on the show, yeah.
Yeah, he has some utterly fascinating information when it comes to the scientific, aspect of what is occurring spiritually, And he does speak of this energy, and he does bring a lot of the good evidence that certain scientists have studied that there does seem to be pulsations that do escape center of galaxies, and this has been recorded over many galaxies. And I guess other scientists have detected that, certain energy particles are approaching, our solar system. Also through David Wilcock, he covers how, our solar system is going through, global warming. There's a lot of changes going on in the planet. And I know he's helped facilitate this information, first initially studied from the Russians, and, ultimately he worked with, I believe, Richard Hoagland, and they brought this information more towards NASA. I don't know what they did with it, but there is a lot of good evidence saying that, yeah, there is some energy that's influxing our galaxy. And could it be stimulating evolution? It's quite possible, quite very real, because if you study DNA, it can work as a template where it is altered by its environment. Just like you see these lizards that are, you put them in a new environment and their legs are growing longer to, escape, their predators, and things of that nature. Once again, I have to give thanks to David Wilcock for that study. He does speak about how there's this one thing he talks about with how certain Chinese scientists have focused a beam of energy through one egg, like a hen egg, and enter like a chicken egg, and then you get a hybrid of the two, when it hatches, meaning that the DNA was excited, carried along through this energy, and therefore you have this hybridization of both a hen and a chicken.
That's right. I've heard this experiment where they had a frog and a salamander, and they used the same energy apparently that was hitting the planet, and without the actual two animals touching each other, they transferred the DNA from one to the other.
Oh yes, absolutely.
And the whole idea of this energy that's hitting the planet is the fact that we are getting a DNA upgrade to ourselves. Humanity is getting a DNA upgrade to ourselves, and that's why more and more people are getting more abilities, so to speak.
Oh yeah, yes, absolutely. I mean, if we look at our history, we look at the evolution of, from Neanderthals to, say people like the Egyptians, and then us. There are definite physical changes. The body of an Egyptian back during their period is more identical to, it would look more like a Neanderthal body DNA than it would our present human DNA. So it's there does seem to be some increase in, changes on a molecular level, DNA level, and also on a mental level. If we look at technology, that is an aspect of the mind, the evolution of our own mind. We are advancing technologically, industrially, and these are basically all things that are first happening in our minds. So there are definite changes going on that are refining our perception of reality, And I think an interesting thing to look into when it comes to our evolving potential, this might sound new to some people, but the concept of other alien civilizations, correct? If these UFOs are true, or they're able to seem to, with a blink of an eye, view from one end of the sky to the next, popping in and out of dimensions, then that kind of activates our own psyche that, hey, there's a lot more, we're children, in the respect of time and potential, I think, what we have achieved thus far. And how far does our history go back? It goes to the cradle of civilization, 6,000 years. That is really nothing considering the spans of time, the eons of time, that has existed for the cosmos.
I think they've blown that time out of the water. I think we go back way, way, way millions rather than thousands.
Yes, you're right.
Yeah, I think they've definitely confirmed that. Steve, you have a question for Joe there?
Yeah. Well, just when we're talking about how old the Earth is in time and all that, I mean, I seen something there only recently on the internet again, I don't believe everything I see or read or hear on the internet. But there was a what looked like a hammer, and they were saying that this hammer was found, and they obviously done the carbon dating on this hammer. It was found in some archaeological dig a long time ago, and seemingly they said it was made of two metals that couldn't have came together by accident. They had to be made. They didn't say man-made, but they said it had to be made, and they were dating it at something like 300 million years ago.
Oh my God!
And just sometimes I wonder, Joe, that when we think that we're evolving and we're getting better and we're getting smarter and we're making all these technological advances day by day, year by year, I'm just wondering, are we really advancing, or are we just relearning stuff that we already knew? And will it come to a point when we will reach a point and it's like somebody will press a reset button and everything goes back to Neanderthal man again?
Well, that's a very good question when it comes to evolution, our spirituality, where we're going, and yeah, that's a genuine question when it comes to the subject. One thing that I like to refer to is, are you guys familiar with the Yugas of India? The ages of India?
Not really, no.
Okay, they have a very, we know that, various cultures have studied, they have their belief in ages, right? You have the astrological ages, you have, with India, you have the yugas, which they refer to as ages. You have the Bronze Age, Golden Age. You have, what else you have? You have the Mayans' concept of ages. The Fifth World, the Hopi Indians, all this stuff with prophecy. I think the Indians have a very interesting take on it because they do refer to cycles of time. And I believe that David Wilcock also talks on the subject as well in his second book, The Synchronicity Key, that things do happen in cycles. And with these cycles, what happens is that there's basically an ascending arc and a descending arc of evolution. So according to the Indian Yugas, we are exiting Kali Yuga, which is considered the darkest of the worlds, and where it's basically greed, selfishness, blah blah blah, which we see in the world. And then after the next, which is Dwapara Yuga, is more related towards spiritual virtues, where there's more a feeling of connectedness with the Creator, a need for compassion, a need for sustainability, and self-sustainability, which does integrate the spiritual aspect. And it continues with yugas. They're sprawled together, and ultimately there's what they refer to as Satya Yuga, which is the highest, which is when we all have our abilities again. There's war still on the planet, but not much. And take that for what you will, because it's such a broad spectrum to look into. But it shows that there has been cycles, and this is a good point, because if these cycles do exist, is there any evidence of a previous golden age, right? So that's one thing. That metal shows that, hey, maybe there was a Satya Yuga in the past, right? You also have objects throughout history that are just beyond our understanding as to how we think primitive man could have achieved some of these, monuments. A good example would be in Baalbek, I believe they call it the Trilithon, which are giant, massive stones. If you place a human by it, he's just dwarfed, and they have these three stones put together, and it's like, how'd they do that? They didn't. Not even the cranes today could have left that.
David Icke said that. He said these stones, some of them are 400 ton in size, and you cannot fit a fag paper between the two of them.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And of course, you look at the ability to raise these stones, and people talk about using vibration. Whatever vibration or the mnemonics, they use the frequency to resonate the actual item so it lifts up and they can move it into place. I mean, Dave Icke has said it in his books, if you read his books, that we've had advanced technology. We were very, very advanced, and somewhere along the line the reset button was pressed, and then we start again.
Yes. I would not doubt, I would have to bring in also like the alien concept. I know how that sounds to some of your audience. But there seems to be more evidence coming out on that. A good person to go to in regards to the whole UFO concept would be Stephen Greer. He's gotten like over 400 government officials, both retired and still present, active, that have gone on the record saying, hey, we want to bring this to Congress, you know? And there's a good video out there, I think it's called 2009 Disclosure with Stephen Greer, and you see all these government officials, you know, giving their truth, their experiences, how they've seen the bodies, they've gone to the crash sites, they've seen the bodies, you know. One interesting individual on that panel speaks how there was multiple race of beings, and he said that they've cataloged more than 50, and he said that some look very human, you know. So the thing is that no doubt there has, you know, in our past, we hear of, you know, things like in India, they refer to the Vimanas, or they used to refer to these flying crafts that were made of steel. And this was way back during, like, Krishna days, you know, just another age, another time.
That's it.
Yeah, so the thing is that I wouldn't doubt that they have visited, you know, and have definitely helped out. Like, think about the Egyptian pyramids, for instance, you know, or like what's been referred to as a Piri-Reis map, where they mapped out America before it was even discovered, you know, and it was quite a technical map. On surface, they described this map as, if you were to see it like on a flat surface, it wouldn't make any sense. But when you wrap this map around a globe, a sphere, then it begins to make sense. It aligns towards the American continent, and also the Arctic was also mapped out. The weird thing about the Arctic is that it's covered in snow, but yet they have the, you know, the physical body of the continent hanging out right there in the map. It's like, and they were saying that the last time that the Arctic was on ice was like millions of years ago, you know? So it's like, okay, then how'd they know that? You know? It's like, and Piri-Reis said that it was, he drew this map with reference maps. So he got a bunch of maps and he put it together. So clearly there were, you know, there were people sailing seas, and maybe even having sky views, you know, maybe UFO, who knows what.
Well, the sky views, I was just going to say, if you look at the Nazca lines, I mean, we didn't spot them until man invented flight, and then we seen the lines. But, you know, how would you do that unless you were up in the sky, you know, coordinating the design? Yeah. Yes, I would not doubt that at all. I mean, you have like the Egyptian pyramid that's aligned to true north, you know? You just have a lot of strange, anomalous, you know, intelligent anomalies in the Egyptian pyramid alone. And interesting, I think that the pyramid, there's a mystique about that pyramid that I think people, you know, generated interest in. There's this one documentary that I saw that, I don't know, might help into saying who kind of helped build it. There's a documentary called The Visitor, KGB Files or something like that, where it talks about how after World War II, I guess the Russian government, you know, wanted to learn more about what was going on in Egypt because of the pyramid. They end up finding out that there was a tomb of the visitor, which was like an alien being and all that stuff. It's pretty interesting. And it kind of connects, well, maybe this was how they got that information as to how they were able to build this monument, you know? Another weird thing on this subject in regards to previous ages, you hear of Edgar Cayce. Are you guys familiar with Edgar Cayce? Edgar Cayce, yeah.
Yes, Edgar Cayce refers to a time where there was a place called Atlantis, right?
Yeah.
A previous advanced civilization. He placed this location, I believe, in the middle of the Pacific. And in that map, that Piri-Reis map, he, I can't recall, I don't want to give misinformation on that, but it's somewhere in the ocean, you know. But you will see that there is another body of land in that Piri-Reis map that isn't there now. Yet everything else matches, you know? It's like, well, could that have been Atlantis? You know, that's just another theory, right?
Yeah.
But he does refer to this information, but he said that, you know, there's this big old cataclysm that happened, and what ended up happening was that the information was saved, and that he said that they took it to different parts of the world. One where the Yucatan Mayans exist, where they have the pyramids there, and then one of the other places was where Egypt now sits, right? And there's a lot of weird connection with, you know, the Mayan pyramid and the Egyptian pyramid. I mean, they both have the same base dimension, for one, you know?
What about them? What about the likes of Planet X and Nibiru, I should say? What's your take on that, and what's happening now with the global changes with weather and everything else? What do you think is going on there? I mean, Do you believe there is a planet? I mean, we know Sky TV announced last week that, they found a ninth planet, conveniently enough.
Yes, you're right. That is a reason. Yes, I heard about that. And continue with the question.
So, do you believe that the ninth planet is actually a Nibiru or Planet X coming in on an elliptical orbit, and this happens every 3,600 years?
I wouldn't be quick to jump and say it is, because if not, then there went that, I mean, I always hold a healthy reserve when it comes to this type of information. Although it's like, okay, I have heard of Nibiru. It did stem from an author known as Zecharia Sitchin. Are you guys much familiar with him?
Yeah, I'm not familiar with his work, but I know him. Yeah.
Okay, he is a fascinating individual when it comes to this concept of a returning planet, and also how, well, with the assistance of our evolution, right, and the cycles, he's the one who helped bring in the whole Anunnaki thing, the reptilians, which David Icke does talk about, and he brings some very interesting evidence to the table. He wrote, I believe, in him being able to translate, I guess, Sumerian text, he discovered that, this is how he started discovering that there was a planet that does like an 8 formation. It exits the orbit of our sun for a little while, and then after it returns back to orbit of our sun, and that's where we get that, the returning of Nibiru.
Yeah.
And according to him, this planet is where the Anunnaki reside, and this is when they're supposed to return, according to the Sumerian text that he says he's translated.
And in the Bible, it mentions wormwood as well.
Oh, yes. One thing that's interesting about him is that he does write things before they were even discovered by NASA. Like, I think he discovered, certain colors, like Planet of Neptune, he wrote it down before it was, just various odd things he wrote before it became mainstream. So could there have actually been truth to what he was saying, So, I mean, if he got some of those things right, could he be right about other things, So when it comes to the Nibiru concept, and what is your interest in its return, about the alien concept, or just validating?
Well, everything. I mean, even tonight, I was watching a video it was posted up on Facebook, of a chap that lived in Spain, and he was on the beach, and he said he's seen loads of these videos on YouTube about, Planet X and Nibiru. And he said he wasn't too keen on believing them because of CGI and all that kind of stuff. But he said, he said, I've noticed this now. And he put up the image, the video of him, of seeing something moving, right, which he said, obviously, it looks like it's Nibiru. And then what he did is he showed the raw data of the video file on the video to say, well, look, here's the raw data of the video file. And I put this up 51 minutes ago from after shooting it. So he said, because he wasn't convinced with the other images, because people can fake it and wind you up and all that kind of stuff. Yes. So what he was saying is, now I've seen it myself, he said, that's good enough for me. And I think myself and Steve would probably be the same way. Steve, I think we'd have to kind of see it yourselves before we kind of, although there's loads of video footage out there, what do you think?
Well, again, yeah, exactly. I'm the same. I will entertain it. I'll entertain the thought, and it's a possibility. But if I can see it with my own eyes, then all the better. Joe, I just have a quick question for you. You were talking about kind of psychic ability there earlier on, and around that time when you started to come on, one of our guests, one of our listeners, John signed off. Now John would be kind of, he approached everything from. How would you say? I'd say he probably studies the Bible.
Yes.
And any time anyone comes on and they start talking about something that maybe, talking about psychic ability or something, John always kind of, he pulls out the Bible and he slams it down and he says, no, anyone who's dealing in this, the word of the Bible is true. Anyone who deals in this psychic stuff, it's the work of the devil and the demonic entities. And he actually logged off. Now, I'm guessing, John, he may check out the podcast. But what would you say to people? I mean, could you offer any solutions or any proof to someone like John?
Yes. It's funny because I'm very familiar with that. I get that myself. I mean, I believe that there was a Christ that walked there, But there's good evidence in that. You have a Russian aristocrat that, goes to Tibet and he starts learning Tibetan text, and he comes across this documentation that there was a being that referred to, I think it was referred to as Isha. I don't recall the exact name right now, but it pretty much fit the description of a Jesus, and then in the Bible you do have his missing years, the missing years of Jesus, right, when he was in his teenage years.
Yeah.
And some say that he went to India, did the studies and the practices, and that's how he was able to, master his miracles. But yes, that's a very, very good point, because here you are trying to help out, our fellow Christians, right? And at the same time not bring them these. I understand where they're coming from, but you got to understand that even the Bible refers to these powers that you can do them yourself. Jesus said it himself. Everything I have done, you could do yourself. So even if Jesus did come and he's doing these miracles, he read minds, he saw Judas was going to betray him. Are they going to run from that? You know what I mean? You also have a verse inside the Bible that says, the children will be I'm paraphrasing. I'm not giving the exact verbatim verse, but he says that your kids will be having visions, and elders will be having dreams, or something like that. There's also a part of the Bible that states that it does recommend you use your spiritual powers, and they say the best one is to speak in tongues. So, if you think from a modern standpoint, what are they referring to? Are they referring to channeling the voice of God, things like Edgar Cayce did, right? Well, since I've had personal experience in that world, I can understand, and they're very hard lodged into the belief system of what the Bible states, and teaches. So I understand that. I understand they're reserved and why they're reserved. It's not something I condemn or, I'm upset about. It's just their, what they're familiar with when it comes to the realms of the spiritual.
Yeah. We've come across it with people, and that's their belief. That's their belief at the moment, and maybe that will change. But at the moment, that's what they believe. So, that's all you can do. But Joe, we've reached that time, and we're going to have to let you go. But a big thank you for coming on the show and telling us about your book and telling us about your belief and your background and what you've been involved in. I'm going to pass you over to Steve. Steve's going to get all your details where people can find out more about yourself and your book, and if they want to contact you. Steve.
Oh, that is wonderful. I had a wonderful time, by the way.
Cheers.
Yeah, no, we always like to hear someone had a wonderful time. That's great. Well, we hope maybe at some later date, Joe, you may join us again and have another wonderful time. But in the meantime, anyone who wants to find out more about you or the book or anything else that you may be doing at the moment, do you have a website that you want to throw at us there?
Yeah, I'm actually a new author, so I still haven't, set up the website. But I do have, they can check out some YouTube videos that I have uploaded, and I do have a book out on Amazon, the website Amazon. And the book is titled Things Magical Once Hidden Revealed by Joe Puente. And that basically covers the magical aspects. Someone who's actually walked that spiritual path and the magic that happens in that world, and also the research of the ages and the scientific data that could go with backing up these spiritual abilities, the spiritual dimension. But I think what could help them out in learning more about me and not jumping so much into a book, they could definitely refer to my videos. One is entitled David Icke 2015 update. What is it? Oh yeah, Reptilians and Other Strange Facts. Another one is, if you go to my channel, once you type into that video, you can go into my YouTube channel, which is Revealed 33, and you'll see another video of mine that covers the prophecies that I bring out and just the fascinating correlations that they have together and how my book, is related to that. So that could get them started as to learning more about me, and definitely leave comments, on YouTube, and I will definitely read them. There's a lot of people who aren't familiar with this, so there's a lot of I guess hard to believe, so to speak, individuals, but it's real. I could definitely validate for it. One thing I can say in my experience is I prove many times in the book that psychics are real. I've done it myself, and I've come across many. That if you find this stuff hard to believe, check out some of the skeptics. Go to a qualified psychic, verify my experience through them, And if that's for you, then cool.
Yeah, no, that's okay. We've actually had psychics on the show and mediums on the show, so we've explained the kind of process through there. Well, Joe, thanks a lot for coming on. A big thank you. Just stay with us there for a minute, and we're just going to go off to a musical break. We'll be back on.
This is Open Your Mind Radio on OYMradio.com, UnitedWeStrike.com, and PeoplesInternetRadio.com.
Okay, we're back. Joe Puente. Check out his book there. It is available on Amazon. I'm going to stick the link up again in the chat rooms there for anyone who may be interested. And we're just going to have to. We did have to do your week, didn't we? So
so
how was your week?
How was my week? Yeah, just catching up on my week. Now I'm sure there's a lot of people out there who have seen the X-Files Series 10, Episode 1 Struggle, where it's coming back on after a big gap of 15 years or something gap, or 13 years gap. And what can I say? I mean, the first series, they basically tell us everything that they're going to do. How that script got through, Chris Carter actually did the script. They obviously let him do it. Getting the information, or maybe he knew the information, but that had to be approved somewhere along the line. I mean, if you haven't seen it, you want to go and see X-Files Series 1 on episode 1, Series 10, I should say. Unbelievable information. I know you haven't seen it yet, Steve, but
no,
you definitely have to go and see it, because they go through everything from chemtrails to the banking system to the food to the drugs to just literally everything. They talk about everything.
And is this, as I mentioned before we actually went on live, I've never seen the X-Files at all. I know the program existed. Is it the same program, or is this like a new one?
Well, this is a new series they're starting up. The X-Files was on in the 90s, and then they stopped around, I think, 2002 or something like that. And they, the best group were Mulder and Scully and Skinner. They were the best three.
Right.
And I think people were asking for them to come back, because when Mulder left, David Duchovny left the show, and they brought in the other guy who was in the Terminator movie. I kind of switched off after that. I didn't bother watching, and it just went all a bit funny. But now, obviously, the demand was for them to come back. But again, there's a lot of talk out there about disclosure, and about the soft disclosure, and letting people know what's going on. And they feel that the X-Files is one of the ways they're actually using the soft disclosure to say what's going on. And they came out and said everything. Now, there is something going around the internet saying, oh, by the way, within 2 days of the X-Files coming out, the CIA have released a lot of information. Well, apparently there's other people saying that information had already been out there. It was already available. So I don't know what's happened there and why that happened. But if the CIA are releasing information, or have released information on their website anyway about stuff that happened, then you have to ask yourself, there's something going on. It's obviously a soft disclosure. You're not gonna get Obama coming out and talking to people and saying, by the way, there's ETs and there's aliens and there's life on other planets. We're not going to see that happening. But the soft disclosure will be using the medium of Hollywood and movies and stuff like
honestly
that.
Though, we were talking about Stephen Greer there earlier, and Stephen Greer was supposed to be doing the Disclosure Project, and then kind of Stephen Greer disappeared off the scene for a while. But I honestly don't believe that in our lifetime, I'm sad to say this, but I don't believe in our lifetime that we will see full disclosure. And the only reason I say that is because of something that I said earlier. When you're talking to people in your workplace, who are old enough to know better, and they're still stuck in the matrix. They're still stuck in their own belief system.
Yeah.
So as long as you have people stuck in that belief system, I think no matter how much proof you offer them in relation to ETs or psychic ability, etc., you're wasting your time with it.
Some people will never get it. Some people are just stuck in the belief system, and that's it. And they won't take the time to go and do the research, but they'll slag everybody else off, or just be ignorant and not know the information. That's just the way it is. And maybe maybe the planet has to reach a level of consciousness before things change. Maybe that's the thing.